This is IGN. The Ants Go Marching. This is your IGN review of Empire of the Ants by Dan Stapleton. This review covers the multiplayer mode of Empire of the Ants. For the campaign, read the single-player campaign review. In short, it's very bad. Empire of the Ants is striking to look at. For a moment, you might even believe it's real macro lens footage of ants in a nature documentary, and the level of detail on the textures of the forest floor is extremely impressive. It's not really what it appears to be, though. This may be a real-time strategy game with swarms of insects on screen at once, but you're never actually commanding more than 7 units, and given the somewhat clumsy way its controls make you cycle through them to give orders, that's a mercy. You may be capturing and building up nests, but there's literally nothing beneath the surface. So while it appears vast, Empire of the Ants is actually a pretty small-scale strategy game in most other ways, and the lack of unit variety in multiplayer modes make it feel smaller still. Multiplayer matches have a fair amount of nuance in how you use your small number of units and build out your nests to tech up, and there's ample room for skilled players to turn a situation to their advantage, with smart use of powers to boost their bugs' damage output and debuff the enemy. It's not unlike a slimmed-down version of Company of Heroes in the way you capture territory and generate the 2 resources, food and wood, and that's a good starting point. Ant units get locked into melee combat and can't disengage until one or the other loses, so you can learn to hold off a dangerous warrior unit until reinforcements arrive, or prevent a retreat while you finish off an enemy. And while you can quickly rebuild a lost unit if you have the food available, each Ant Legion has a home nest they'll respawn from, which can mean there's a long hike back to the front lines. However, Empire of the Ants feels thin relative to most real-time strategy games, in large part because there's fundamentally only one faction to work with. Everyone always has the same set of workers, big-headed warriors, and gunner ants as their primary units, and they all counter each other in a straightforward rock-paper-scissors balance. You can't even play as the visually different termites you fight against in the campaign. The only variety comes from the ability to customize your loadout by choosing 4 of 8 available powers for your main ant to cast, swapping out your support unit between healing aphids, armoring snails, or troop-carrying beetles, as well as one of 3 super predator unit types. Those certainly enable different strategies, but I'm not a fan of the way locking those choices in before a match begins limits your ability to pivot to a different approach if your opponent throws you a curveball. I'd rather be able to switch from the flying wasps to the acid-resistant beetles as my choice of predator if my enemy goes heavy on gunner units, for instance, but that's not an option. Another major weakness of multiplayer is that there are only 2 modes, 1v1 or 1v1v1. That means there's no option to play cooperatively with a friend against the AI, which is very weak even on the highest difficulties and doesn't seem to know how to use powers, which are crucial. It does have 21 maps at least, and there's a fair amount of diversity there in terms of how they're laid out and the creeps that guard their resource caches, like huge spiders and praying mantises that are cool to watch your ants take down. That's good because it soon becomes clear that there's basically no variety to the bugs' animations. At first, skittering around at high speeds can be entertaining, even when the controls freak out because you accidentally climb a small branch and start spinning around it like an actual confused ant. Watching a swarm flow over terrain is convincing and, since we're up so close, dramatic. Warriors will pick up enemies in their big jaws and shake them around, and dead bodies are flung high in the air like mortar boards at a high school graduation ceremony, which I don't think ants actually do, and then roll down hills. But once you've seen one ant versus ant fight, you've seen them all. Beetles in particular get repetitive to watch very quickly because of their lunging attacks. Even so, there are good reasons to play the Empire of the Ants' multiplayer, which cannot be said for the single-player campaign. Empire of the Ants' multiplayer modes have some clever ideas for how insects do battle, having you scurry around as a commander giving orders and casting buffs on your legions of bugs. Managing its deceptively small-scale battles presents some interesting challenges, and the impressive, hyper-realistic graphics are let down only by animations that grow repetitive after a few matches. What undermines it most is the lack of unit variety in multiplayer modes, which don't include multiple bug factions or any options to play as a team or against a competent AI. Without that, it's hard to see this game having a lot of legs. Empire of the Ants' IGN score? 6. Thanks for listening to IGN. My name is Tony Jackson, and for the latest Empire of the Ants updates, visit us at IGN.com.
Spoken Layer.